13 years after it got independence, South Sudan has never held an election. Last week, Juba yet again shelved the long-delayed general election, citing a lack of preparedness. This is the second time the country, which gained independence in 2011, is postponing elections and extending a transitional period that started in February of 2020. So this week on the program, we delve deeper into why Africa's youngest nation has repeatedly failed to go to the ballot and what needs to be put in place to ensure elections are eventually held in South Sudan. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Now, before we begin our discussion, let's take a brief look at South Sudan from its independence. On July the 9th, 2011, South Sudanese nationals voted to separate from Sudan, making the country Africa's youngest independent nation. However, a civil war erupted in December of 2013 when fighting broke out between government forces and soldiers loyal to Riek Machar, leading to millions of South Sudanese being displaced. Amid threats of sanctions, President Salva Kiir signed a new peace deal with Machar in August of 2015, reinstating him as vice president. Riek Machar was later sworn in. But weeks after that, fighting broke out once again between government forces and soldiers loyal to Machar. In August of 2018, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar signed a new ceasefire agreement and formed a transitional government. In August of 2022, the same parties signed a 2-year extension of the transitional government, delaying elections in the country. High-level mediation talks on South Sudan were launched in Kenya in May of 2024 between the government and rebel groups. And again in September of 2024, South Sudan's parties to the 2018 peace agreement extended the transitional period by another 2 years, delaying the country's first anticipated democratic elections that had been scheduled for this December. Well, joining me now to unpack South Sudan's elusive election are from Juba, Oliver Mori Benjamin, spokesperson for the South Sudan Parliament. Also in Juba, Lorna Merekaje. She's an analyst with the South Sudan Democracy and Election Monitoring Organization. And in Nairobi, General Lazaro Sumbewa, mediator and Kenya Special Envoy to the IGAD-led peace process. Welcome all to the program and thank you. Oliver, let me start off with you here. South Sudan's transitional government has once again postponed the December 2024 general election to December of 2026. Why has this election been extended a second time, and what specific factors led to that postponement?
The government has not taken a unilateral decision to postpone elections. The elections are postponed based on the recommendations of the parties to the agreement. In the National Election Commission, they said that the time was not enough from now to December to demarcate constituencies, to conduct census, and so on. This is as far as elections are concerned. The registration of the political parties. There are some parties which are not yet registered. And taking also into consideration that we may get our brothers and sisters from Tumaini group, they are to be given a chance also to come in. If they want to register their parties, that has to be given so that they will also participate in the elections. We have some of our people is still in the neighboring countries as refugees. These people also have to be given certain consideration. The unification of the forces, which has not taken place. And actually this is a major reason. You cannot conduct election while organized forces are having different commands in the country. This is a major factor as far as the army are concerned.
Lorna, from where you sit, why has the election been postponed? And importantly, should it have been postponed?
Well, thank you very much. I think the reason why the elections has been postponed is because there is no adequate preparation. However, we also feel that, some of us feel that there was actually no will to conduct the election. So basically it was going to end up with postponement.
So when you talk about there was no will on whose part?
There was no will on the part of government, because there are prerequisites that needed to be met before conducting elections, and that has not been put in place. And simply, there hasn't been financing for the electoral processes. And if you look at Electoral Commission, which is the center of the elections, which everything is centered around, there hasn't been sufficient preparation within the institution to manage elections. So we feel that the government would have done more. The government would have allocated resources long ago. And we feel that the government should have acknowledged that elections is not just a process that you pronounce and it happens, but it's a process that requires certain preparations to be done. And the fact that the preparations were not prioritized, we strongly believe that there is no political will to have elections in December.
General Tsumbewa, from where you sit, why has this election been postponed? And should the elections be postponed?
Yes, they can be postponed. What they have agreed is in public domain. According to Article 8.4 of the revitalized agreement, and also according to the roadmap, they could extend the agreement. However, there are countries and organizations that do not approve of it. The Troika, which is Norway, United Kingdom, and United States, did not support the extension. However, the agreement of 2018 gives them the right to extend.
Mm-hmm. So the political parties and some political parties and South Sudan's government, they did reach a consensus to extend that traditional period by 2 years. So what exactly were some of the issues that they cited as the reasons for the postponement?
They had only implemented 10% of the agreement that was 2018 agreement, and they were in the process of implementing another 31%, which means the remainder of the agreement had not been implemented. So that is where the problem is.
When we talk about the other part of the agreement that has not been implemented, can you just give us an indication of where the sticking points are? Is it the agreement of the 2018 agreement? Which are the sticking points here?
They implemented establishment of a government, but they did not establish, including things like the bringing together their various armed forces that were fighting, they're training them and putting them, unifying them. They have not done very many things. They have not done anything as regards judicial reform. They have not done anything on the issue of economic reforms. So there is a lot of things that have not been done.
So, Oliver, I want to understand it from South Sudan's perspective here, because there are a lot of issues that have not been implemented following the 2018 agreement. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges for South Sudan, particularly related to getting to an election time?
Yes, within these 2 years of the extension, we expect those items not implemented in the agreement will find their way towards implementation. And here again, it is matter of resources. The guarantors and the partners to this agreement should really come in financially to support the process of the unification or the implementation of some of the articles.
So, General Sumbeiwa, now your job as a mediator to the South Sudan process is to facilitate talks with the various groups and other sections of society in that country. And these include the so-called holdout opposition groups organized under the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, the religious groups, and civil society. Break it down for us. Just who are the actors in the South Sudan conflict and what are the interests here?
On one side of the conflict, on the one side of the negotiations is the revitalized transitional government of national unity, which has got the SPLM in government, they have got SPLM in opposition, they have former detainees, they have South Sudan Opposition Alliance, and other opposition parties. Those are on one side. And on the other side, the holdout groups, they have the group of Bagana Mum, which is called the real SPLM. They have a group of Paul Malong Awan, which is called South Sudan United Forces. And you have one group headed by General Stephen Boy, SSPM and SSUNA, and you have one headed by General Mario called the NAS RCC on one side.
Right, so Oliver in Juba, your thoughts on this, and we want to understand what exactly is impeding the peace process, because impeding the peace process means that you cannot hold the election. What is impeding South Sudan's peace process, Oliver?
The impediments are many, but the major ones are these: the unification of the forces, which has not yet been completed, and then the contributions from the grantors. And then above that, even if the unification is going to be completed, there is this arm embargo on South Sudan. How do the international community accept us that we unify these forces and we don't have arms? Even the first batch, they all graduated with the sticks. So it is also a responsibility of the international community to see in that as the government forges forward for the unification of these forces, the arm embargo on South Sudan has to be lifted.
Right. General Sumbeiwa, do you agree that the arms embargo is one of the biggest impediments to peace in South Sudan?
South Sudan is awash with firearms, and that should not be an excuse.
Oliver, your thoughts. South Sudan is awash with firearms. This is really not an issue here.
It is a very important issue, because today, if you go to rural South Sudan, in the rural areas, these rebel groups even, which General Sumbeiwa is trying to bring them in, they have arms. And you cannot go barehanded to say you bring your arms. The first batch was completely integrated without any single soldier handing in even a pistol. And yet, during the time of confrontation of the government, there was no any battle which was fought with the sticks or with spears. Where are these guns?
So, Lorna, you know, there was so much hope for peace in South Sudan when the country gained independence in 2011. Just take us back. Exactly how did South Sudan get here?
Thank you very much for raising this question. It's a very special question and quite dear to many of us. When we got independence in 2011, it was a very euphoric event, and the euphoria was evidently written on all our faces. And you can imagine by then, it's like everybody wanted to contribute to have South Sudan attain independence, which we all did. But how we got here is because the political elite decided to operate as if the country only belongs to them, and they only listen to themselves, but also fight among themselves if they're dissatisfied with what they're discussing behind closed doors. The citizens were alienated, and I think that's how we reached here, because national processes are quite huge and everybody has a contribution to make, but the citizens' part is not being done, and is not being allowed to contribute in the whole full picture. And I think the other thing that made us to reach here is that the objectives of the political elite quickly shifted to self-fulfillment, shifted to self-interest, and shifted towards building or amassing wealth for individuals. You can't believe, and I've said this repeatedly, that it beats my understanding that South Sudanese, many South Sudanese dollar billionaires today, in 2011, we all didn't have so much. What happened? So I think the fact that national resources were directed towards personal interest made us to reach where we are. Right. Because then we have institutions that are not supported, and these institutions are not able to do the necessary preparation.
So we are going to take a short break now. When we come back, we will look at what may need to be put in place to finally hold elections in South Sudan. To stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Still with me are Oliver Mori, Benjamin Lorna Merekaje, and General Lazaro Sumbeiwa. Before the break, we looked at some of the challenges to South Sudan's quest for a general election. Let's now look at what needs to happen to ensure that elections are finally held. General Sumbeiwa, you did mention earlier that South Sudan has not held an election since independence in 2011. What might be the impact of postponing this election? How important are elections to that peace process?
The elections are extremely important because the people will have to be consulted. And if you have to consult people, then you must have certain parameters correct. The issue of people who are in displaced, internally displaced camps, people who are refugees in other countries must come back so that they can take part in the elections and be part of the choosing of their leaders. Preparations, of course, requires that you have a census, you have a boundary elimination for constituencies. You also have to establish a proper body all the way from the national to the county and even to the Boma level of the electoral body that will take care of the elections so that they have proper, credible elections. And so these must registration of voters so that people know where, and then there must be education. Why are people going to vote? So that they know their position as they vote, that they will have leaders that they have chosen themselves.
So, Oliver, there are a lot of issues that need to be put in place. As General Sumbeiwa has mentioned there needs to be a census, there needs to be civic education, there need to be, an electoral body. And international guarantors of the peace process did say the postponement of the election is the outcome of a failure to implement the 2018 peace agreement. So, can an election be realistically achieved in 24 months? Can those issues be put in place, Oliver?
Surely, I think the 24 months which have been agreed upon for the extension was done after recommendations from the Political Parties Registration Commission, from the Election Commission itself, census, and everything. They will ask to advise what is the appropriate time. So these bodies came up with their proposals that they need a minimum of 2 years that these things all can be done. It will be done.
Right. So
to sure that election come 2026, yes, it will be possible.
So, Lorna, from your understanding, though, when you look at the preparations that were not done and what is expected to be done in the next 2 years, do you think that there can be an election in 24 months?
Well, I think there are two things that we need to take in place. One is if we operate in an ordinary environment, then it will be difficult because electoral cycle usually takes about 4 to 5 years. But if we're operating in an extraordinary context like South Sudan, and if there's will to have elections done, I think it's possible. It can be done. Mm-hmm. We're not a very big country as such, so I think it can be done. And that is if the revitalized transitional government of national unity starts the preparation right now, because they should have actually started it as of yesterday.
Right. Let me put that question to General Tumbewa. From where you sit, General, as a result of the peace process and holding of that election, do you think that South Sudan can realistically hold that election in 24 months? And what issues exactly need to be addressed if South Sudan is to eventually hold the election?
First of all, South Sudan is on a transition constitution. The problem about South Sudan, if you want to get them out of the problems that they are in, is to get them a permanent constitution. Therefore, in 24 months, they will not be able to do the constitution, even if they do the elections in parallel. So it would be very difficult, and elections, by the way, does not bring peace. It could also bring war if it is not properly organized. And I have an example of what happened in my country, 2007, 2008, and we were able to have a new constitution in a record 9 months. But the rest of the things took quite a long time, and we are still grappling with them up to this day. It's not something that you can fix it straight away. You have to get the people to buy whatever you are doing. So the elections, if you want to do the elections alone, you still will not have resolved the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. You must move from transitional constitution to a permanent constitution.
So, Oliver, what are the mechanisms that South Sudan is putting in place to ensure that in the next 24 months there is going to be an election, to ensure that that election date is honored?
As Samboyo puts it, the process of making a permanent constitution for the country will come as a bill from the executive to the parliament. And that will be done. And then above all, it is actually, as I told you earlier, these bodies for the constitution making process, registration of political parties, unification of forces, it is their recommendations which they have brought forward, and because democracy in South Sudan is growing positively, this is why the president accepted that if this is what the technical experts in party registration, constitutional making process, the census to be conducted, that in 2 years, he has no problem, he will not pressure that elections have been to be conducted partially.
Right.
So this shows a determination of a political will from the people of South Sudan.
Let me get your final thoughts here. And General Sumbeiwa, let me start off with you. Can elections serve as a turning point towards peace and stability in South Sudan?
If they are not credible, you could start a war with elections. And so I would wish also, we are not isolated. South Sudan is not in isolation. The war that is going on north of their country is robbing them of all the resources, 93% of their income or their of their economy. So unless and until a better conducive atmosphere, or unless the international community, including the United Nations, help South Sudanese to prepare for the elections, for South Sudanese alone to do it, it is impossible.
So, Lorna, do you think, though, that elections can serve as a turning point towards lasting peace and stability in South Sudan?
Well, elections per se, without preparation, it will not. But elections with genuine preparation and putting systems in place, reform and transformation is what this country needs. Until we do that, we will have elections, and the elections might be contested because the narrative in the country is that everyone wants to, winner wants to take it all. I think we also need to have political education among the political elite to be able to understand that governance processes or elections are processes that somebody or some people are bound to not get it, and they have the opportunity to contest again. So I think even if we have the elections, without addressing some of the challenges affecting our society or affecting our country, it will not end the problem.
All right.
Because you still hear leaders saying that if the elections is done in this situation, they fear that there will be conflict, and the problem is who is going to fight who? The citizens don't have the arms, so they themselves know that they are going to fight each other, which is unfortunate.
Right. Oliver, I want to get your concluding remarks, and I do want to hear from the government side if you think the elections will serve as a turning point towards lasting peace in your country.
We are aware of the problems around us. We are aware of the economical situation in our country. Our pipeline that takes our oil to Port Sudan is no longer working. So this is why I agree with Sumbeiwa. It demands a collective effort from the international community to make sure that peace is also brought to Sudan. We definitely need resources, partners or the grantors to come and participate. We had the experience in 2018 up to the extension, the first 2 years. There was nothing. They gave us lip service. So we hope by this time the international community also takes its responsibility and to make sure that South Sudan is back up so that really they move for these elections.
All right.
But on our part as a country, we are moving forward.
All right, thank you all very much. But that's all for this edition of Talk Africa. A big thank you to our guests, Oliver Mori Benjamin, spokesperson for the South Sudan Parliament, Lorna Merekaje, she's an analyst with the South Sudan Democracy and Election Monitoring Organization, and General Lazaro Sumbeiwa, mediator and Kenya's special envoy to the IGAD-led Sudanese peace process. Remember, you can be a part of this conversation online through our social media handles on Facebook and X. You can also catch this show on our YouTube playlist. Do keep the conversation going and join us next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team here in Nairobi, until next time, bye-bye.